Test. Yeah, it's very loud actually. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. And ready to start. Okay, so today is Tuesday, September 3rd, and this is 9 a.m. Okay, we'll begin with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so now, yesterday we finished going through the rather grueling, how did somebody put it, tortuous Abhidhamma explanation of dependent origination by way of the 12 links. And now when you look at the formula for dependent origination, the standard formula will never be the same. Now let's go through a kind of broad overview of dependent origination. Sort of now we're looking at the formula, the standard formula. Literally, it won't be the same because we've gone through that rather extensive Abhidhammic analysis. And so now let's see how we get, I want to break this into segments. Okay, we can start here. Okay, so now looking at the formula again, now we could understand it, I think, much more clearly, even without using that rather detailed analysis in terms of chittas and rupas and chaitasikas. So we start off with ignorance as condition, the sankharas, the formations come to be. So here, ignorance will be, in the sutta explanation, lack of knowledge, lack of realization, lack of insight into the Four Noble Truths. And we could say more broadly, lack of understanding of the basic ethical distinctions of the wholesome and the unwholesome, not understanding the roots of the wholesome, the roots of the unwholesome, not understanding the three marks of impermanence, dukkha, non-self, not understanding dependent origination itself. So because of that fundamental avijja, ignorance, which the Buddha says it's been lying dormant, both dormant and active in the minds of all unenlightened sentient beings through time without beginning. If you look in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the, let's take a look. The Anamatagga Samyutta, the connected discourses on the beginningless samsara. So it says the samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. So this ignorance has been lying dormant in the minds of sentient beings, in our own minds, through time without beginning. And then because of this, I call it a primordial ignorance, we engage in various activities that create karma. Those activities are called the sankharas, here translated the volitional formations. And according to the sutta, they can be bodily, verbal, and mental. And then they can also be classified, well, simply as wholesome and unwholesome volitions that create karma. And then the wholesome, in some of the suttas, are distinguished into the meritorious, which is the sense sphere, wholesome, the fine material sphere, wholesome, that is, the volitions in the jhanas, and into the deep, into the imperturbable, which are the volitions created with the attainment of the four immaterial attainments. And the fine material sphere, in sutta terms, will be the volitions that are active in the four jhanas. Okay, and then of course there's the demeritorious, which are the unwholesome volitions. And then the sense sphere wholesome can be bodily, verbal, or purely mental, whereas the fine material sphere volitions are always just mental because one is absorbed in the jhana. The imperturbable volitions, of course, are always just mental, and the unwholesome or demeritorious volitions can be bodily, verbal, or mental. Okay, so here we have, with ignorance as condition, a person engages in various activities, wholesome and unwholesome activities, which are driven by wholesome and unwholesome volitions, volitions that create karma, that constitute karma. And then those volitions are, in a sense, stored, or those volitional formations are, in a sense, stored up within the ongoing stream of consciousness. And those volitions have, since they're karma, they have the capacity, the potential to produce results that correspond to the ethical nature of those karmic volitions. So the wholesome volitions create desirable results. The unwholesome volitions create undesirable results. Okay, then with the volitional formations as condition, there is consciousness. So this is understood at the initial level that some volition, some volitional formation, could be a especially powerful one, a habitual volition, one that occurs with some degree of strength at the time of death, or it can be just some chance volition that arises unexpectedly out of the blue. But during the death process, it comes up into the forefront and takes on this role of generating the new existence. And so this volitional formation in the initial case will produce the rebirth linking consciousness. And that rebirth linking consciousness is a resultant consciousness, which is a result, a karmic result of the volitional formation generating rebirth. And if it's an unwholesome karma that's generating rebirth, then the rebirth linking consciousness will arise in one or another of the bad or unfortunate destinations. If it's really heavy, negative karma, it could be in the hell, one of the hell realms. If it's a milder negative karma, it could be rebirth as a hungry ghost or preta, afflicted spirit, or as an animal. If it's a wholesome volitional formation of a weak kind, then it will generate a human rebirth, but a human rebirth with a person with sort of incomplete faculties, either disturbed or defective mental functions, or inherently lacking certain of the sense faculties, functional sense faculties. If it's a mildly wholesome, a stronger wholesome rebirth consciousness, but one with two roots, then it will be a person who's fairly normal, but they don't have, lacking the third root, the root of non-delusion. Their capacity for spiritual development will be limited. Of course, they can undertake practices, but they would lack the ability to gain the insight knowledges and to reach path and fruition. And so the most desirable of the wholesome rebirth consciousnesses leading to the human rebirth would be one with three roots. And then if it's a highly meritorious volition of the sense sphere, it can cause rebirth into one or another of the 6 heavenly realms. And there's a view sometimes that I've heard, maybe this came up earlier during this retreat, an idea that rebirth in the Deva realms is undesirable because you can't reach any kind of realization there. But that is not true according to the suttas. We see in the suttas that Devas come to listen to the Buddha teach, and many of the Devas gain the stages of stream entry, once returning, non-returning, even arahatship through the Buddha's teaching. What is true, as I think I said, is that a Sammasambuddha always arises only in the human realm. Of course, for somebody to become a fully enlightened Buddha, they have to live under conditions where there's a mixture of happiness and suffering in order to come to a realization of the Four Noble Truths about suffering. Okay, so volitional formations can lead to rebirth in the Deva world. Then for those meditators who gained and have a fair degree of mastery over the 4 jhanas, that volitional formation will lead to a rebirth linking in the plane of existence that corresponds to their jhanic level. And those meditators who gain the immaterial attainments their volition will generate a rebirth linking consciousness in the immaterial plane of existence that corresponds to their level of mastery. Okay, so this way we see with how volitional formations condition consciousness. And this begins, I should also continue that this begins with the rebirth linking consciousness, which just lasts for one moment. But this rebirth linking consciousness then becomes the bhavanga, which continues through the whole course of life as the underlying substratum consciousness. And then karmic volitions or karmic formations through the course of the life will repeatedly come to maturity in active cognitive processes as the 5 kinds of sense consciousness and the other chitas involved in sensory cognition. So unwholesome volitional formations will mature in types of sense consciousness which cognize undesirable or disagreeable objects, whereas wholesome karmic formations will generate types of sense consciousness which cognize desirable or agreeable sense objects. And this continues through the whole course of existence. So the volitional formations are a condition for consciousness, not only at rebirth linking and not only through the bhavanga, but also through various kinds of active consciousness. Okay, then we come with consciousness as condition. There is with name and form. Or mentality, materiality. Or we could say the psychophysical complex. That exists along with consciousness. So at the moment when rebirth takes place, when the rebirth linking consciousness arises, it arises along with various mental phenomena, the coexistent mental phenomena, some feeling, some perception, some volitional activity. And then form, in the case of the sense sphere and even the fine material sphere, there'll be some materiality arising along with the rebirth consciousness. And so in the terms of the Abhidhamma, that will be the 3 decades of, what were the 3? The body base. Oh yeah, the body decade, the sex determination decade, and the heart-based decade. Okay, and then and then in the course of life, as one develops, of course, there'll always be, throughout the entire course of life, along with consciousness, there'll always be name and form, mentality, materiality. So our life, we have consciousness, the awareness sort of flowing out through the 6 senses, and then we always have some, along with consciousness, some feeling, some perception, various volitional activities. And of course, all of this is arising based on this physical body, which is material form, with all of its material constituents. So this is consciousness as condition, name and form. And even though consciousness is here said to be the condition for name and form, but we also know that name and form is the condition for consciousness. So our consciousness can't function. I mean, there couldn't be any such thing as consciousness if there weren't the 3 other mental aggregates along with it. And in our human existence, there can't be consciousness without a physical body as the physical support for consciousness. The only exception to this, actually 2 exceptions, in the immaterial sphere of existence, there is consciousness with mentality, but no material form. In that strange plane of existence called the impercipient realm, the non-percipient realm, there is material form without any mental activities at all. Ah, I remember you. He's been, this is an old friend of mine who aspired for rebirth in the non-percipient realm. Now he's been reborn as a teacup. But he'll come back and get his consciousness when... Shall I drop the cup on the floor and shatter it? Okay, then we come to the next link with name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases. So at the very moment of conception, there is present, I'm taking always the human, case of a human rebirth, at the in human life at conception, as I mentioned, we have the body base, and then there's consciousness, which is the mind base. Well, let's say at the moment of rebirth linking. I'm not sure that's necessarily identical with conception, with biological conception. So human life at rebirth linking, there's the body base and mind base. So these two bases, these are the two ayatanas. The heart base, if you remember the word base, it's a completely different word in Pali. But in terms of the ayatanas, there's the kayayatana and manayatana, body base and mind base. And then as the embryo develops over the succeeding weeks, there will gradually emerge at least the starting points of the eye base, ear base, nose base, and tongue base, until when the baby comes out from the womb, it will be fully equipped with the 6 sense bases. And so in this way, we have, with name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases develop. Okay, and then equipped with our 6 sense bases, we encounter objects, the objects corresponding to each of the 6 sense bases. And that encounter with the object generates contact. And so what is contact? It is always explained as the coming together of internal base, that's the sense faculty, plus external base, object, plus the corresponding consciousness. And so since there are 6 sense bases, we have eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact. Those are 5 contacts with external objects, respectively with visible forms, sounds, odors, tastes, and tactile objects. And then there is the internal contact we call mano sampassa, mind contact. So this would be the contact that takes place with purely inner objects, objects of internal perception, reflection, thought, emotions, and so on. When we look back into ourselves, what the contact that takes place with that inner object, with that purely mental object, is mind contact. And so we have 6 kinds of contact. And then with contact as condition, feeling arises. So feeling is also of 6 kinds, corresponding to the contact. So feeling arisen through contact at the eye, feeling arisen through contact at the ear, at the nose, at the tongue, at the body, and then the contact arisen through internal reflection. So those are 6 kinds of feeling, and those feelings can also be distinguished in terms of their tone. Remember, I said that when we use the word feeling in the Buddhist context, it doesn't mean emotion, which is a rather complex phenomenon, but the feeling is I call it the felt tone of an experience as being either pleasant, painful, or neutral. So we have these 3 tones: painful, pleasant, neutral, and occurring at the 6 sense bases, occurring at the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and internally at the mind door. And then in response to these different kinds of feelings, craving arises, craving for the objects of the senses. So the suttas explain craving as craving for visible forms, craving for sounds, for odors, for tastes, for touch sensations, and craving for mental objects. And in terms of the 3 feeling tones, we could say that we have sort of craving directly as sort of its primary focus is on pleasant feeling, because one wants to enjoy pleasure. That's the way the human mind, or even the mind of all sentient beings, is wired, sort of inherently, intrinsically wired to pursue pleasure, to enjoy pleasure. So the sort of direct objective of craving is to experience pleasant feelings. But we don't always have pleasant feelings. In fact, we have a lot of painful feelings. So when we encounter painful feelings, there comes a craving to escape from the painful feelings. And usually the way one escapes or tries to escape from the painful feeling is through pursuing pleasant feelings, particularly for the case of ordinary people, pursuing pleasant feelings as through indulgence in sensual pleasures. And then there's neutral feeling, and neutral feeling actually could swing both ways. If the neutral feeling that's not pleasant, not painful, if it's of a lower gradation, it can lead to a kind of boredom, tedium. And so the way one tries to escape that boredom or tedium is again by going out to Coney Island, the Coney Island of the mind, for some kind of enjoyment, pursuing pleasant feeling. Or else the neutral feeling can be quiescent and peaceful. This is especially the case with the higher meditative attainments. In that case, a subtle attachment develops towards that peaceful equanimity of the meditative absorptions, and then a craving to again and again enjoy that peaceful equanimity. So that is the craving for neutral feeling. Okay, so we have craving arising out of feeling. Then with craving as condition, there is clinging. Okay, so when craving becomes persistent, well, we could take craving as the desire to obtain what one does not possess. And then when one acquires the object of craving, there comes an attachment to it. That attachment is clinging. And the text, as we saw, specify actually 4 aspects of clinging. So one aspect is the clinging to sense pleasures. So this we could say is simply a intensification of craving. So it's in a direct continuation of craving. As the craving becomes more solidified and hardened and holds to the objects acquired, that is what is called clinging to sensual pleasures. But in order to, in a sense, justify itself and to justify its pursuits, craving also gives rise to a variety of views. And so this is the other aspect of clinging, is formulating views, speculative, theoretical views, religious views, philosophical views that are rooted in craving and that serve to justify that craving. And of these various views, the one that Buddhism takes as sort of the most fundamental view is the view of a self. And so the view of a self is maybe an expression of clinging rooted in craving. And it seems to me that underlying the 4 types of clinging mentioned in the suttas is another type, the more fundamental clinging, is the clinging to the 5 aggregates as being mine, I, and myself. So I'd say that is the most fundamental clinging. And out of that fundamental clinging comes the 4 kinds of clinging enumerated in the suttas. Okay, then with clinging as condition, there is existence. And if you remember the text starting with the Abhidhamma, with canonical Abhidhamma text, distinguishes 2 kinds of existence, 2 aspects: karma existence and rebirth existence. And so karma existence is the side of life in which we create new karma. And rebirth existence is the side of life in which we experience the results of old karma. And so karma existence is really just, again, pretty much identical with the volitional formations. And then rebirth existence is the type of rebirth that results from karma. And we already went through the various kinds of rebirth. So rebirth in the sense sphere, either in the bad destinations or the good destinations, rebirth in the fine material sphere, rebirth in the immaterial sphere. And so then when it's said with existence as condition, there is birth. Or actually, in this, when we divide existence into these 2 stages, one could say that karma existence is the condition for rebirth existence. But then when we say with existence as condition there is birth, birth actually includes under it, or it's included under rebirth existence. And so the existence that is the condition for birth is only the karma existence. So the karma that we are generating and creating in this life will become the condition for our rebirth into the next life. So in this way, existence is the condition for birth, And then with birth as condition, there comes aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair. So in this way, we've gone now through the 12 factors of dependent origination, and now even without going down to the level of chittas and chaitasikas, we could get a very, very, I would say, precise and exact understanding of dependent origination from the sutta point of view. Okay, now there are certain ways now of treating the 12 links, which we have to, we should bring in to complete our investigation of dependent origination. Let's see where I have this. Yeah, we find it in the Visuddhimagga. Okay, so here the Visuddhimagga is speaking of the roots, the times, and then it has, the verse is rather obscure. It's better to take the prose. Okay, so there are two roots amongst the 12 factors. Two factors are considered the roots. These two are ignorance and craving. Ignorance is considered, I just want to see something. Actually, I think the version in the comprehensive manual is better than the Visuddhimagga version. Okay, so the 12 links, the 12 factors, are distinguished into 3 periods of time. And this often leads to misunderstandings, which we'll see have to be sort of dispelled. Okay, so in terms of the layout of the 12 links, it's said that ignorance and the sankharas, the volitional formations or karmic formations, belong to the past. Birth and old age and death belong to the future. And then the 8 factors in between belong to the present. So there are those 3 periods of time. And then I think this note here sort of dispels that misunderstanding. So the note says, when the 12 factors are divided into the 3 periods of time, this should be seen as a mere expository device for exhibiting the causal structure of the round of existence. It shouldn't be taken to imply that the factors assigned to a particular time period operate only in that period and not on other occasions. Like I've heard some people say, the 12 links, assigning them to the 3 periods, that is foolish, because how could you say birth, old age, and death pertain to the future as though we're not born in this life? How do you say ignorance belongs to the past as if there's no ignorance now? But as it said here, in fact, the 12 factors are always present together in any single life, mutually implicative. They implicate each other and interpenetrating, as will be seen below. Okay, so this is just as a matter of convenience, just to show what I would call the causal dynamics of the 12 factors. So they're distributed into these 3 time periods. Okay, then the 12 factors we already have seen. This will make clear how these 12 factors interpenetrate. This is the 4 groups. And so it said here, by taking ignorance and karmic formations or volitional formations, craving, clinging, and existence are also taken. So when you mentioned ignorance, craving and clinging always go along with ignorance. And when we mention karmic formations and karmic existence, these are really just 2 different terms for the same thing. So we have these 5 going together. And likewise, by taking craving, clinging, and existence, ignorance and karmic formations come along. So when there's craving and clinging, there's always ignorance behind the craving and clinging, and karmic existence and the volitional formations are basically 2 terms for the same thing. And then when the text mentioned birth and old age and death, what is it that undergoes birth, that undergoes old age and death? But it's the 5 things: consciousness, name and form, the 6 sense bases, contact and feeling. So those are included. And so therefore, it said there were 5 causes pertaining to the past, 5 effects to the present, 5 causes pertaining to the present, and 5 effects pertaining to the future. So these are the 20 modes. So here we have the explanation. When ignorance is unabandoned in the mind. Can you see the smaller print in the back? Or I could go up to 350. Okay, when ignorance remains unabandoned in the mind, then craving and clinging are bound to arise. And whenever craving and clinging occur, they are always rooted in and accompanied by ignorance. And then the terms karmic formations and existence are both referring to the same thing, karmically active volitions. And so when one set of terms is mentioned, the other is implied. When the other is mentioned, the former is implied. And birth and decay and death are not enumerated separately because they are the characteristics of mind and matter. So the ultimates, the things that they actually signify, are the 5 factors from consciousness through feeling. Okay, then another explanatory device are the 3 connections. So these are the connections first between past causes and present results. So this is the connection between sankharas and consciousness. Sankhara belongs to the past, consciousness to the present. Then there's a connection or link between present results and present causes. So the present results are consciousness, name and form, the 6 sense bases, contact, and feeling. So feeling is the endpoint of the results from the past. Feeling is the present endpoint of the resultant phase. And then craving begins a new active phase in the present. And so the second link is between present results, that's feeling, and present causes, which begin with craving. And then the third link is that between present causes and future results. So we have the present causes are craving, clinging, and karmic existence. And then the future results are birth and old age and death. And so here the link is between karmic existence and future birth. So that's 10 and 11. And actually there's a table 8.1 which shows this schematically. Okay, then another way of dividing up the 12 factors is in terms of what's called the 3 rounds. And so first we have the round of defilements. This is the kilesa vata. So the round of defilements consists of ignorance, craving, and clinging. And then the second round is called the round of karma. And this includes karmic existence and the karmic formations or the volitional formations. And then the third round is rebirth existence. And the third round is called the round of results. And this round includes rebirth existence and all the other factors. So consciousness, name and form, the 6 sense bases, contact and feeling, that belongs to the round of results. So it seems that if you really want to get the fundamental view of dependent origination, the 12 factors is a somewhat artificial scheme, but the basic dynamics can be understood through these 3 rounds. We have the defilements arising, ignorance, craving, and clinging. Then when these defilements arise, we engage in various activities that create karma. So that is the round of karma. And then the defilements and karma operating together bring into being a new existence, beginning with birth, developing through old age and death. And the new existence consists essentially of the interplay of consciousness with name and form, with mentality, materiality. This is the table 8.1, which shows everything that I've been explaining. Then I think the only thing left are the 2 roots. And so the 2 roots are ignorance and craving. So, and then ignorance is said to be the root from the past extending into the present, which reaches its culmination in feeling, and craving is the root from the present extending into the future, which reaches its culmination in old age and death. And so it says, the great sage, as the Buddha, has thus expounded this entangled, beginningless round of becoming with its 3 planes as dependent arising, dependent origination. And then the one thing to touch on before we take our break is the ending of the round. Yeah, so here I've gone back to the sutta. This is sutta number 51 of the Nidana Samyutta. The text says, if a person immersed in ignorance generates a meritorious volitional formation, consciousness fares on to the meritorious. If he generates a demeritorious volitional formation, consciousness fares on to the demeritorious. If he generates an imperturbable volitional formation, consciousness fares on to the imperturbable. So this is sort of the brief statement of how ignorance leads to the volitional formations. The volitional formations generate the corresponding consciousness which reaps the results of these karmic formations. But when a monk or any practitioner has abandoned ignorance and aroused true knowledge, then with the fading away of ignorance and the arising of true knowledge, he does not generate a meritorious volitional formation or a demeritorious volitional formation or an imperturbable volitional formation. Okay, so this shows that the sort of antidote to the whole dependent origination is abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge. Okay, and then since he does not generate or fashion any volitional formations, he does not cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, he is not agitated. Not being agitated, he personally attains nibbana and understands destroyed is the round of rebirths. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming back to the state of being. So the whole process of dependent origination comes to an end through abandoning or the fading away of ignorance and arousing true knowledge or clear knowledge. And the arousing of this clear knowledge, that is the task of the Noble Eightfold Path. And so the Noble Eightfold Path is not included in dependent origination itself, but from other suttas we see that is the way to ending the ignorance and the craving that are the two roots of dependent origination. But that will be the topic for next year's Abhidhamma retreat. Okay, so I think maybe we can take a break now, and then the next session, the final session of this retreat, is just entirely devoted to questions. So if you have questions during the break, you can write them on a slip of paper and put them down here. Of course, if you don't want to write them down, you could bear them in mind, but the warning is that if there are too many paper questions, then you don't get to ask your question in person. Okay, so let's take a break till, I think it's till 11:20. Oh, I said 11:20, till 10:20.